Is Mr. Elmhorst with the lesson 6, multiplying or dividing integers rules. So when we multiply or divide integers, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on making groups, regular or opposite groups. So regular, we're going to just represent them as positive, there's no change to it. And then opposite would be negative groups. So we're going to be making groups of integers. So the integers are going to be groups of positives or negatives. Okay, and we're going to end up making a integer rules triangle here, but we'll come back to that. So let's look at the number line and look at as far as these groups here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have 4 positives. And we're going to put it in parentheses, just saying that that is a group of positives here. And then we have 1, 2, 3 groups of them. So, which is 3 times 4. And this is how many groups you have. There's 3 groups of 4 positives, which is a total of 12 positives. So starting at 0 on the number line, we can jump positive 4, and then another positive 4, and then another positive 4. So there's 1, 2, 3 groups of them. Okay, so that's just straightforward. 3 times 4 is 12. So now we're going to get into what do the integers look like. Well, we look at the groups here. We have 4 negatives. So let's say we have negative 4. And then we have 1, 2, 3 groups of them. So then we just do 3 groups of negative 4. So 3 groups of negative 4, then we have a total of 12 negatives. So what we can do is here negative 4, 1 jump, negative 4, and 1 more jump, negative 4. Okay, so no issues there. Okay, so now we look at, so 3 times negative 4 gives you negative 12. All right, so we're going to get into another example here. Now, what if we had opposite groups? So opposite groups. So here, if we had 4 positives, and then for some reason, if we wanted to switch these, let's say we had 4 positives and then we wanted to switch them and what it would look like on a number line, well, then we just put a negative on the outside, and that negative is going to change all these to negative. So we're going to say that is just saying that we have opposite groups. So negative 3 times 4, 3 times 4 is 12. So instead of going in the positive direction, if we go in the opposite direction, if we make these negative groups, opposite groups, then we are actually going to end up at negative 12. Even though we started with 12 positives, if we multiply by a negative, it's telling us to switch all of those. Oh, wait, hold on. Make sure you got it starting at 0. There we go. We're actually going to do the opposite of positives and then go negative. So it still follows the same rules as above. So here we had 3 groups of negative 4, and then here we had negative groups of 4. So a positive times a negative would be negative, and then a negative times a positive would also give us our negative, the same result. Okay, and then for the last example here, what if we started with negatives inside, and then we made them opposite groups. So these are the opposite examples down below. So if we had negative 4 inside our groups, and then let's say we have 3 groups of them, and we made them opposite groups here with the negative on the outside, well, again, this negative, this opposite group is telling us to go in the opposite direction of negative 4, which is actually going positive. So the opposite of negative would make it a positive. It's actually going plus 4. So we're going to learn this rule here. So if we have double negatives, the opposite of a negative is actually telling us to go positive. So up above, if we're multiplying positives and positives, our answer is positive. And if we're multiplying negatives and negatives, our answer is positive. So only in the middle, these two examples here, if you have a positive times a negative, your result is negative. So let's go up to the integer triangle up above, and let's put that down. Okay, so if we have negative groups of negatives, and you are multiplying or dividing those groups, then you would have a positive result. So this is the opposite here. When you have a negative with a negative, one of these is telling you to do the opposite of the other. So the negative, the opposite of positive is negative. The opposite of negative is positive. So if we use that rule over here and we set it up, so the negative of a negative, so multiplying, so the opposite of a negative is a positive. And then if you have the negative times a positive, the opposite of a positive takes you back to a negative. So we can set up these rules. And then if you have the positive, which is the regular, the positive of a negative is not going to change it. It's still going to stay negative. So when you have the same sign in your multiply, negative times a negative is a positive, but then you would also leave a positive times a positive would stay positive.